Welcome everybody, Steve here. Well, we're continuing on with our basement bedroom, and everything's been all drywalled and we're all screwed down, so we're ready to start mudding. And I know that's one of those jobs that nobody really likes, but it's one of my favorites. For some reason, it's such a peaceful job. You know, you're just kind of being an artist. And I know that there's a million different videos out there, and the thing that you need to do is take from each one that little thing that's going to help you achieve what you want. There might be a technique that you say, hey, that's going to work for me. So hopefully in this video, you'll pick something up and say, that's going to work for me. So that's the whole idea of doing these videos, is just to have that little tip that's going to help you get your job done, because it's not really that tough of a job. I've taught a lot of people how to mud walls, and every one of them has been very successful at getting their jobs done. You know, none of them have gone on and become, drywallers, but it doesn't matter. As long as you get your job done, that's all that counts. So the first thing we're going to do is, on a typical job, you've done your best to hang the drywall. Now, if you watched my previous video, and don't forget to subscribe. That really helped me out, and I appreciate that. But on the last video, when we drywalled this bedroom was one of the crookedest rooms I've ever worked with. So you're fighting and you do your best, but every once in a while there'll be a gap. And I'll show you a couple gaps. I've pre-filled some of this stuff a long time ago, before I was even doing videos. And anything over 1/8 of an inch gap, you should pre-fill. Now the reason is, it's just going to make putting that tape down and mudding that much easier. And I'm all about that one step that's going to make your life easier. So I'm going to show you what product I use and where I'm going to pre-fill. Here's one of these situations where the corner has broke out, and I can tell right now is just a little too tight. You push the drywall in and it breaks out. You have to get rid of that. So we're just going to cut it out, break it out, and now we're left with a big gap in there, but we're going to pre-fill that. Now sometimes your drywall will actually come damaged a bit. And I think that's the case on this piece here. So that's going to be another spot. Grab my knife here. That we'll have to pre-fill. And when we put our pre-fill on there, it'll level this all out, and then it'll make it really easy for us to put our corner bead in. This isn't too bad here, but we're over 1/8 of an inch. We'll pre-fill this as well. So the product I'm using is a Cinco concrete fill. It's quick setting. It still takes time to dry, but it sets firm fairly quickly. Let's get you set up here. Find a knife. Now we're not going to need too much. Now, one thing with this stuff that I really like is it doesn't get really hard. So, like let's say we had to fill a spot here, you could take and just give it a light little scrape, and that's all you have to do. There's no real major sanding or chiseling to get this stuff to come off. Just add some water, a little bit at a time, or else you're just going to keep adding more. Ugh, jeez, of course. See, I added just a little bit too much. That's okay. It actually works out in your favor if you do that. That way you can get all the lumps out. This is actually pretty close. Just want it just a little thicker than this. Just add a little bit more. There we go. That's nice. Be able to fill a fairly good void with that. No problem. Now you want to make sure you get quite a bit in there. You don't want just kind of a thin little skiff in your crack. You want to make sure you work it in really well. And then the important thing is you just make sure that you smooth it all out. And if you do that right, then you won't have to worry about sanding anything or scraping. I like to mix my mud until it's about whipped cream consistency. Now when you're mixing it, you can go a little bit thinner because it will thicken up a little bit on you. And you know what? Bring it to a point where you like to work with it. You know, it's taken me a long time to figure out what I really like, and that's what works for me. So when we're doing the joints, I like to keep my mud in a little tray like this. Like I don't go out and spend, you know, big dollars on the fancy stainless one or anything like that. It might last longer, but you know, simple is better. This thing will last forever. The reason you want to leave your joint compound in here is because it takes a long time to do the joints. So, and you're using less mud. So you don't want it to dry up. So it's going to dry up quite a bit less in here than it would be if you're holding the hock. But we will be using the hock when we do the finished mud. You'll see that later. So simple, and I'm using a 4-inch knife. No bigger than a 4-inch knife. When you're setting your paper, that's all you want. From there on, then we get bigger. But for the first one, 4-inch bucket, you're ready to go. So our pre-fill, it's all set up now, and it only takes a couple of hours to set up. It's not going to dry, but it'll set up hard enough that you can tape over top of it. So when we want to start taping, we always do the verticals first. So I've only got 2 of them in this room, and so I always want to start here, and then we're going to do the horizontals, and then we will do the corners. Corners will be done last. So we got two factory edges coming together. Now, when you do a butt joint and a butt joint together, you know your mud's going to be minimum 2 feet, 1 foot at least on either side, probably a little bit more in order to hide that. Now, a lot of times what happens is just a little flare on the edge. So what I do is just take a block of 80 grit and I just give it a little bit of a sand. And it just takes that little bit of a flare out of there, gives you that edge. Now when it comes to taping, there's a couple of options. You can use the paper, which is what I prefer. It does a nicer job. I find that if you use the mesh, you can get cracking because it doesn't really take the expansion, contraction at all. We don't have to worry about it too much in this room because the lumber is old. Don't have to worry about that. But I will use paper on all the joints, but if it's about a foot or less, I'm going to use the mesh. Just makes it a little bit easier. So we're going to start here, and I'm going to get the mud, and basically I've got a little rig here, just kind of hooks onto my pocket or your belt, and then you can just kind of wheel out whatever paper you need and then just use your knife and cut her off. But I'm going to show you all that stuff. I'm going to try and be as detailed as I can about how I do this. I've been mudding my whole life, and you know, I'm no big pro at this at all, but this is one of those jobs I love doing, and when I'm done, I have some pretty good results. So hopefully you're going to get something out of this. So above the door, there's a couple of horizontals that are, you know, only about this big. I'm going to use the mesh for that. But first joint we're going to do is this one right here. Okay, I've got my mud mixed up, and you saw me mixing it there, and I like it fairly thin. You don't want it too thick because you want to be able to press this out of the paper, right? And if it's too thick, it's not going to come out and you're going to be left with a bulge, and then you're in big trouble because then you really got to go a long ways to hide that. So I've seen a couple of videos, and I see guys going like this, you know. Yeah, if you got lots of time in your lifetime, you know, you can do that. But just take and put a little bit of mud on the end of your knife like this, and then just on a little bit of an angle, about 10 degrees, and then you just slowly bring it down. And then you just very lightly go over top of it. You want about a little under 1/8 of an inch thickness, but you want it nice and uniform. If you're a little thin, just add some more. And the reason that you want it nice and uniform, and you want to make sure that there's no dry spots, or else you're going to get a bubble when you put your paper in, and the only way to fix that later is to cut it out. Hopefully we'll get a bubble. I don't know. Job like this, maybe I'll get one, but we'll see. Anyway, I'm going to get on the ladder, get a close up. Now sometimes what I'll do is I'll just put my knife in the middle so I can see where the center of the joint is, so that when I put my paper on, I know where to go. So now you do, and you don't have to go right to the ceiling because you're going to have your corner bead there. Just lay it on. Get down here, just rip it off. And now, the first thing you gotta do is very lightly, you wanna set this. Now if you go too hard right off the bat, you're gonna pull it out of the way. And then it'll pull down, and then you're gonna have to kind of rejigger it. So you just want a light set on that. I gotta get my bucket. And then basically what I do is I work about half of it at a time, and then you put some pressure on your knife. And I got quite a bit of pressure on there. The knife is bending quite a bit. Because you want to get this mud off. A little bit of a wrinkle there, it's alright. The flatter you can get this, the better off you are. Now I don't want anything left. So if there's any little goober, you just make sure that you get it all off, because or else you're going to end up having to scrape it. A lot of people, what they'll do is they'll leave it, you know, kind of rough like this and think that it's all good. No, on your joint, you don't want anything left. Just like that, done. Now these ones here, I probably won't mud until I do my corner joint here. It'll be all good. Now it's time to start doing the horizontals. And simply, same thing. You're laying on a seam of mud. Nice and even. A little thin right here. Now this is our factory seam here. So it has a little dip and a dip. So these ones here are a little easier to do. Now on these ones, you just want to go, you don't want to go too heavy right off the bat. Kind of go with a medium pressure, just so you don't get a big bubble. Now on the ends, you can do is just run your knife this way. That way it's not going to pull and come bubbling out over here. And then once you got that, just make sure you got everything nice and clean. Now you can come back, put a little bit more pressure on that, come straight across. She's done. You do a nail hole think I'm at this one. You want to go one way and then you want to go another way. And you don't want to just try and, so you don't want to just put on a bunch of mud like that, call it good. You never ever want to leave an edge. Always nice and smooth and feathered out. While I'm here, here's a spot where I missed. You just take the end of your knife and you just tap it a little bit. Give her a 1, 2, 3. Now, one mistake a lot of people do is they got their knife a little bit too sharp. You come in here like this. What you want to do is just, let's finish this corner off here first. Got some mesh over here, so I'll just put my extra over there. I like to keep my knife at a little under 45. That way you're not going to gouge anything. Everything just kind of flows a little nicer. And that's more important in the finishing than it is here. Now, this drywall, for some reason, when I took it apart, it all ripped, there's quite a bit of it. Now, there's a couple ways of approaching this. If you're running into issues, you can put a little bit of primer on there first, or you can just put a real thin coat of filler in there first. Okay? Don't put it too thick, because what it can do is it can get underneath the paper and bubble. And if you do that, then you got to cut it out. Now, if you come to a spot where you got a little bit of mud buildup, just bring it down like this and just pull the mud out, and then you can kind of continue on. Now I got to do my seams on the ceiling. So what I do is I've actually got a couple of little scaffolds right there, and they are just, that is the answer right there, because then you can walk straight across. You don't have to do anything. I've done jobs where I've used stilts, and that really helps a lot. Doesn't help when you're shorter, but we'll get her. Time to do a corner joint. My favorite. Just gotta make sure we scrape some pre-fill here. Now typically, what you want to do is you want to measure up your paper before you get started. So I just basically, you can go along any part of the wall, doesn't matter. And I just come all the way down to the bottom, and I'll cut it off. You'll probably lose me in the frame, but all I'm gonna do is cut her off at the bottom. Now, we got our paper. Now you can see that we need to bend this paper. You can see where it bends, just has a natural bend in it. That natural bend, you can see that would be the pointy side. I put that against the wall when I'm doing my flats. And then to bend it, you just basically bend it. You can do this if you're patient enough. Just put two fingers together and just do a nice little, light little roll like that. That bends the paper. Same procedure. I just butter the knife up. Just follow along, just like that. Now when you even this out, go nice and light and make sure that you're not dragging your edge of your knife over here and taking all this off. Just make sure you got a little bit of an angle and you even it all out. A little bit more here, there we go. Now when you put this corner bead in, you want to make sure you're at the ceiling. And then you just use your fingers and just slightly set it with your fingers so that it's right in the corner. Now just a light one on this side. Light one on this side. And then once it's set, then you come back and you put a little more firm, you put your firm pressure on. Make sure that you're riding the edge right on here. You don't want to be bending your knife in on an angle or you'll cut your paper. And then you just follow right along, firm pressure. That side. Done. We'll just continue all the way down. Now sometimes your wall is going to be a little bit crooked and you'll end up with some bubbles because your paper's folding in or it's coming out. You just have to just work those out. And when your paper's wet, it'll bend where you tell it to bend. It'll be just fine. Now when you use mesh, you got a bit of a gap in here. Make sure that you press your mud into it, because you want some mud in behind if you've got a gap in here, or else it'll end up cracking on you. If you just give it a light little coating like this, and you didn't press it in, probably gonna crack on you. So once you got it pressed in, then you can just feather it out. Now we're going to do the upper corners here. You can do those first, it doesn't really matter. It's kind of preference. But what I'll do is when I measure it out, I just come along the wall like this. And then I'm going to give it just a little extra. And then what I'll do is I'll trim it in the corner so that I get as tight as I can. Now that all the joints are done, we can get finishing off with the screws. And you always carry the screwdriver with you. There'll be that odd one that you have to screw in just a little tiny bit. Yeah, 2 in a row. Jeez. Shoddy. Alright, that's what a corner should look like when you're done. Leave nothing behind. Make sure that there's no ridges or anything on your mud, or else you end up having to scrape it before you put your next coat on. So in the morning, we're going to get started with our finished mud, with our first coat. And that's the best. If you can get through, in a few hours doing a room like this, you're doing really, really good. And this is the toughest part of the whole job when it comes to mudding. It's getting all the paper down and all your joints done. But once you got that done, then it gets a little bit easier. So until next time, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for part 2.